On the night of July 30th, 2026, the Japanese government spent up to $59 billion. In a few hours. Not on roads, not on defense, on buying its own money. It barely worked. The yen jumped, then sagged again. So the next day, someone else stepped in. The United States Treasury started buying yen too. The first time Washington and Tokyo did that together since 1998. But here's the strange part. America didn't pay in dollars. The New York Fed sold euros to buy those yen. That was a choice, a careful one. So why does the richest country on earth rush to rescue somebody else's currency and then refuse to use its own money to do it? Hold on to that question. Because to understand that night, you have to go back 40 years, to when the yen was the strongest currency on the planet and the rest of the world was frightened of it. September 1985, the Plaza Hotel, New York. Finance ministers from 5 countries sit down in a room and decide, on paper, that the dollar is too strong. Japan is selling America too many cars, too many televisions. Something has to give. The agreement they sign is 1 paragraph of diplomacy and 1 earthquake of economics. Japan agrees to let the yen rise. It doesn't rise. It detonates. In under 3 years, the yen roughly doubles against the dollar. Call it the Plaza Squeeze. The moment a currency stops being priced by an economy and starts being priced by a committee. For a Japanese exporter, this is a catastrophe. The same car, the same factory, the same worker, and suddenly the price in American showrooms has doubled. Toyota executives start counting margin in single yen. For everybody else in Japan, it feels like winning the lottery. A salaryman walks out of a Ginza bar at midnight and hands the taxi driver a 10,000 yen note without checking the fare. He doesn't need to check. Overseas, his money now buys twice what it did. Japanese buyers start collecting things. Rockefeller Center, Pebble Beach, a Van Gogh for $82 million, a world record at the time. And the Bank of Japan, terrified that the strong yen will crush its exporters, does the one thing that seems obvious. It cuts interest rates. It makes money cheap. Cheap money has to go somewhere. It goes into land. By 1989, the ground underneath the Imperial Palace in Tokyo is valued at more than the entire state of California. Not the buildings, the dirt. This is the Land Delusion, the belief, held by an entire nation at once, that land in Japan simply cannot go down because it never had. On December 29, 1989, the Nikkei closes at 38,915, the highest number in its history. Nobody in that room knows it will take 34 years to see that number again. The crash doesn't arrive as a crash. That's what makes it so cruel. The Nikkei slides through 1990, then 1991. Land follows, more slowly, the way land always does. Prices don't collapse. They leak. And the banks, which lent against all of it, quietly discover they are holding loans against collateral that no longer exists. So write them off. They don't. Writing them off means admitting the size of the hole, so the loans stay on the books and the borrowers stay alive on paper, and Japan invents a phrase the whole world will later borrow, the zombie company. Meanwhile, the Bank of Japan reaches for the only tool it has. It cuts. 6%. 4. 2. 1. And then, in 1999, it arrives somewhere no major central bank had ever been. 0. This is the zero floor. Below it, ordinary monetary policy stops existing. You can't make borrowing cheaper than free. What zero does to a country is subtle and strange. A woman in Osaka opens her passbook and sees the interest her savings earned that year. It's a few hundred yen. Not a few hundred a month. A few hundred. Total. She reads it twice, then puts the book back in the drawer. Prices stop rising. Then they start falling. A bowl of ramen costs the same in 2005 as it did in 1995, and that sounds wonderful until you understand what it means. If prices fall next year, the smartest thing you can do is not buy anything this year. An entire economy learns to wait. Wages flatten. A generation graduates into part-time work and stays there. The world starts calling it the lost decade. Then, when the second one ends, nobody bothers to rename it. 2013. A new prime minister, Shinzo Abe, and a new central bank governor, Haruhiko Kuroda, decide that 20 years of caution was the mistake. Kuroda's plan is not subtle. The Bank of Japan will buy government bonds on a scale nobody has attempted, double the money in the system, and keep going until inflation appears. The yen falls from around 80 to the dollar to around 120. Exporters cheer. Tokyo stocks finally move. And somewhere in London, a hedge fund analyst notices something. Japan will lend at basically zero. Forever. They've said so out loud. So? So I borrow in Tokyo at zero. I convert it. I buy anything on earth that pays 5. I keep the difference, and I didn't use a single dollar of my own. That is the carry trade. Call it the borrowed yen. It is the most boring idea in global finance and one of the largest. There's a second effect, and Japan feels this one on the street. A cheap yen makes the country cheap. A tourist from Sydney sits down in a Kyoto noodle shop, eats, pays, and works out on her phone that the entire meal cost less than the coffee she bought at the airport before boarding. By 2019, Kyoto is so full of visitors that residents start complaining about their own buses. For over a decade, Japan quietly becomes the world's funding desk, the place where money is manufactured, cheap, and then spent somewhere else. Australian bonds, Mexican debt, Brazilian real, eventually American tech stocks. Every one of those trades has the same hidden requirement written into it. The yen must stay weak. If the yen suddenly strengthens, everyone who borrowed it has to buy it back, all at once, at a loss. You'll want to remember that. 2022. Inflation finally arrives, but not from Japan. The Federal Reserve raises American interest rates at the fastest pace in 40 years, 0 to 5%. The Bank of Japan does not follow. It holds. And a space opens between the two countries that becomes the whole story. Call it the gap. Money always flows toward the higher rate. If America pays 5 and Japan pays nothing, then every day the gap stays open. Another river of capital leaves the yen. The yen falls from 115 to the dollar to 150. Japan intervenes in the autumn of 2022, the first time it had bought its own currency since 1998. It buys a few months. 2024 brings the first real move. Japan finally ends negative interest rates, and on a single day that August, when the yen jumps and the carry trade unwinds in a panic, the Nikkei drops more than 12%, the worst day since 1987. All those borrowed yen bought back at once, which is the lesson Tokyo takes into 2026. This thing cannot be fixed quickly without breaking something. So the Bank of Japan moves slowly. In June 2026, it raises to 1%, the highest Japanese interest rate since 1995 and a genuine milestone. And it does almost nothing, because America is still paying between 3.5 and 3 3/4. The gap is still open. By late July, the yen touches levels not seen in 40 years, around 163 to the dollar. In a supermarket in Nagoya, a woman picks up a block of imported butter, looks at the sticker, puts it back, and takes the domestic one instead. She has been doing this for 2 years now. It isn't a decision anymore. It's a habit. Now, in fairness, and this matters, plenty of serious people argue this is not a crisis at all. Japan is an exporting nation, and a weak yen makes every Toyota and every Sony cheaper abroad. Corporate profits in Tokyo have been strong. Tourism is booming precisely because the country is cheap. And Japanese core inflation this summer came in at 1.6%, which is not a currency spiraling out of control. It is below the target the central bank has been chasing for 30 years. By that reading, a weak yen is a policy that's working, and the intervention was just about smoothing out the speed of the move. That argument is reasonable. It is also missing the thing that made two governments spend historic amounts of money in 48 hours, because the problem was never really what the yen was doing to Japan. Then comes the night of the $59 billion and the American Treasury and the euros. So, the question from the beginning: why did Washington care? Start with the obvious fix. If the gap is the problem, Japan should simply raise rates hard. 4 hikes, 5, close the gap, done. It can't. And this is the part almost nobody says out loud. Japan owes more than twice the size of its entire economy. It is one of the most indebted developed nations on the planet, and for 30 years that was survivable for exactly one reason. The interest on it was nearly nothing. raise rates sharply, and the government's own debt payments swallow the budget. This is the debt handcuff. The country cannot defend its currency with rates because the rates would come for the country. So if you can't raise rates, and printing more money makes it worse, there is one lever left. Sell something foreign and buy your own currency with the proceeds. And what does Japan own? Roughly $1.15 trillion of United States government debt. Japan is the largest foreign holder of American treasuries in the world, has been for years, which means the standard way for Japan to save the yen is to sell American bonds. In size. Into a market that is already tender. And when treasuries get sold in size, their price falls and their yield rises. And the American 30-year yield went to 5.24% that same week. The 10-year has climbed from 4.1 at the start of the year to around 4.6. That is not a Japanese number. That is an American mortgage, an American car loan, the interest on American government debt. So no, Washington was not being sentimental. The Treasury Trigger was pointed at its own bond market. Helping Tokyo buy yen directly was the cheaper option, and paying in euros instead of dollars was the same instinct twice. Whatever you do not touch the Treasury market. The American Treasury Secretary said the yen was substantially undervalued and kept publicly asking Japan to raise rates. Now you know why he was asking so loudly. The yen did not break on the night of July 30th, 2026. It broke in 1985 in a hotel conference room when 5 men decided what it should be worth. It broke again in 1989 when a country decided its land could not fall. It broke slowly through 30 years of zero when the cheapest money in the world quietly became the plumbing everyone else's profits ran through. $59 billion in one night, a second government helping the next morning. And within 2 weeks, most of that move had quietly leaked back out again. That's the thing about a 40-year decline. You can spend anything you like on the last night of it. And the country that finally came to help wasn't saving Japan. It was saving the price of its own debt.